Hello, I'm Dr. Mark Baird. I am a psych professor out of Whitworth University, and I am truly grateful to be here with you with people who are passionate about understanding and caring for people who are homeless. When I was approached about speaking with you about the link between trauma, does it need to be closer? All right, trauma, addiction, and homelessness, I was excited. As a clinical psychologist and former Army psychologist, I've had the honor of hearing brave people's stories of trauma and resilience, and of being able to see the pain that is behind the behavior. So to have organizations like UGM, Adult and Teen Challenge, and Life Recovery Solutions, which impact so many lives, moving beyond the labels and behaviors, and to see the person and to treat the trauma is frankly exciting for me. So, as a professor, I like to teach, and I'm going to make you guys do what I make my students do, all right? So, this is going to be a little participation right now. So, if you will first, okay, you got to listen to all the instructions first, all right? So, I'm going to have you turn to your neighbor, introduce yourself, and shake their hand for 6 seconds, okay? Ready? Begin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the best part of my speech, is you guys talking to each other. All right, just like my students, some of you followed directions and some of you didn't. That's okay. So I'm going to give you one more chance. I want you to turn to a different neighbor, introduce yourself, and shake their hands for 6 seconds. One more time. Okay. This is perfect. Thank you, guys. All right, I'm going to have you participate in one more thing, and we'll get back to why I actually did that. Can everyone just raise their right hand? I'm not swearing you in for anything. Just raise your hand. All right, put your thumb in like this, and then flip your hand over there. What you now have is a hand model of the brain, okay? So you can put it down now. I'll just use it now. This outer part represents the cerebral cortex, all right? This outer part. It's the latest developing part of our brain. It's the part that makes us human, that allows us to have the frontal lobe, which says things like, hey, pay attention to what's going on. Hey, this is good for you to do. Even though this is hard, this will pay off in the end. Or, hey, even though this feels good, this is actually going to be destructive later on. That frontal lobe is very important. This is the slow part of the brain. It's the part of the brain you want online when you're listening, when you're in relationship. This is the part that allows you to thrive. When I had you shake hands for 6 seconds, I did something. AXI Tosun was released. It's a hormone that was released into your brain, and it increases this feeling of safety and trust. And when we have feelings of safety and trust, it keeps our cerebral cortex online. And this is why groups who trust each other, who feel safe, learn better, frankly, right? So I kind of hijacked your brain in that way. You're sorry and you're welcome. I'm sorry and you're welcome. There you go, yeah. So that's good, right? We want the cerebral cortex to stay online. But what happens when we don't have that feeling of safety? When we sense danger? When we get the slightest sniff of danger, our brainstem instantly sends a message to our limbic system. So this limbic system is the part that is responsible for our safety. It is fast, right? It is fast and it is dumb, okay? So, but that's kind of the trade-off. So this internal alarm goes off. And when that internal alarm goes off, what it does is it sends a signal to flood our system with adrenaline, with cortisol, that increases our heart rate. It brings blood from our trunk and goes into our major muscle groups, right? So we can run or we can fight off the tiger. I would suggest run. But, we go into fight or flight. Our breathing gets faster. And as our cortex, goes offline, we lose IQ points. We're dumb. We can barely think. And you've literally flipped your lid, right? And so we end up with a very fast and reactive brain, but one that is geared for surviving, but not thriving. So now you have a little idea of how the brain and body react to danger. Let's talk a little bit about trauma. So Daniel Siegel, who's a researcher out of UCLA, he's the one who taught me the hand brain. He defines trauma as any experience we have that overwhelms our capacity to cope. I have some of my students from my trauma class right now. They're nodding in agreement. They've heard this before, right? So any experience we have that overwhelms our capacity to cope. So when something bad is happening, at a certain point, it can reach a level where we're overwhelmed. So we go offline. We may go into fight or flight. We no longer are able to fully put together what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're feeling. And if we can't escape, if we can't get away from that, we may even go into freeze and even dissociate, right? Where our mind says, I can't be here anymore. I'm out. And this is why memories of trauma are often just these flashes of sights, of sounds, of strange feelings, right? Because we have disintegrated memories. This is problematic if the trauma first happens even in adulthood, right? It takes a lot of our already developed coping skills to recover. But just imagine if this trauma is taking place as a child. There's a brilliant study done a few years back. So Kaiser Permanente, an insurance company down in San Diego, would do wellness checks for everyone who was insured. So the sick and the well. It wasn't just people who were coming because they weren't feeling well, but they did it for everyone. And after the wellness check, the patients were sent a survey asking about bad things that they might have experienced as children. And they called these adverse childhood events, or ACEs, okay? So ACEs included emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, having a household member with a mental health disorder, or who was incarcerated, or who abused substances, parental separation or divorce, or living with a mother who was battered. And ACE studies have found that childhood trauma has a profound effect on one's future health and behavior. Some of the things they found that if someone has experienced 4 ACEs, it doubles their risk of heart disease and cancer. It increases the likelihood of alcoholism by 700%. It increases their risk of a suicide attempt by 1,200%. That's 4 ACEs that will do that. If someone has experienced 5 ACEs, they are 7 to 10 times more likely to use illegal drugs. But it makes sense, right? Because childhood trauma teaches kids early on that life is dangerous. Their alarm is constantly getting tripped. It's knocking their cerebral cortex offline. It's inducing extreme feelings of terror, yet leaving few resources to deal with those overwhelming feelings. Have you ever had like a neighbor's car alarm that's going off in the street in the middle of the night? Or I lived in an apartment building, and our next wall neighbor would set his clock alarm and then would leave before it went off at 3 a.m, right? So it's ma, 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 right? And oh my goodness, it was maddening, right? When that happens, you'll do anything to turn that noise off, to make that alarm go silent. You might scream out the window, shut your alarm off, right? You might desperately search for earplugs, and if you can't find it, grab cotton or anything and stick it in your ears. And if it's still going off, you can't make it stop, you might just huddle under a pillow and just cry. A friend told me about that, right? And that's just those external alarms. How much more unbearable for those whose internal alarms are constantly going off, accompanied by that feeling of terror. And we know, 1 John tells us that living in fear is torment. We are going to look for any way to quiet that alarm. Drugs and alcohol do quiet that alarm. Sure, they have significant consequences, but when you're in your limbic system, right? That's why treating a drug and alcohol addiction and homelessness isn't just about changing the behavior. It's helping to quiet that alarm in healthy, life-giving ways. Now, I've spent a lot of time focusing on how trauma can negatively impact the brain and the body and contribute greatly to addiction and homelessness, but that is not the end of the story. We've been shown by countless folks who have been helped by these organizations, by Tyson's story, that growth and healing can happen. The good news is, as humans, we are naturally primed for resilience, for bouncing back. When we are willing to see the survivor in all of their goodness, in all of their shame, in the things that they are proud of, and the things that they thought that they would never speak of, and then demonstrate genuine care and concern, love, then transforming work begins to happen. When I was first given the opportunity to explore the main campus of UGM, to experience the work that they're doing over there, we walked into the eye clinic where I saw a man trying on new glasses. I will never forget his face. His eyes were lit up. His grin was from ear to ear. And it was evident to me that the internal message he was telling himself was, at least to these folks, I am worth it. I am a person worthy of examining, of talking to, of getting my needs met. That is love in action. From the Bible to the latest psychological research, it is made clear that we can love because we are first loved. To be fully seen and fully loved is transformative. When we can see the people we encounter, when we first demonstrate love and compassion, then we can come alongside and help heal the consequences of trauma and provide our fellow beloved humans tools to make lasting and positive changes.